Imagine this. A 65-year-old woman, heiress to a massive candy fortune, walks out of the world-renowned Mayo Clinic and vanishes forever. No ransom note, no witnesses, no body. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood thriller. It's the true story of Helen Brach, the candy heiress whose disappearance in 1977 sparked one of the most bizarre and sprawling investigations in American history. What happened to Helen Brach? Her case file reads like a detective novel, filled with eccentric characters, dark secrets, and a trail of clues that lead straight into the shadowy underworld of Chicago's elite. Helen Brach wasn't just wealthy. She was fabulously rich. After her husband Frank Brach, the president of E.J. Brach and Sons Candy Company, passed away, Helen inherited a fortune worth an estimated $60 million. That's over $300 million in today's money. She lived a life of luxury in her Glenview mansion, surrounded by priceless art and attended to by a loyal staff. But Helen was more than just a socialite. She was a passionate animal lover, donating millions to animal welfare causes. She was also known for her sharp mind and, at times, a stubborn streak. She was a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. This very determination may have been what led her into a world far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. In the years leading up to her disappearance, Helen had found a new passion: horses. Not just any horses, but champion show horses. She poured millions into her equestrian hobby, aspiring to own the best in the country. This new interest brought her into contact with a charismatic and well-connected horseman named Richard Bailey. Bailey was the kind of man who could charm anyone. He was handsome, smooth-talking, and moved in the circles of the wealthy. He promised Helen access to the most sought-after horses in the industry, and she was captivated. She began investing heavily with him, buying one expensive horse after another. There was just one problem. Richard Bailey was a con man. A very, very good one. The horses he sold Helen were often old, lame, or worth a fraction of the price she paid. He was bleeding her fortune dry, one fraudulent sale at a time. But Helen Brach was no fool. By late 1976, she was growing suspicious. She told friends she was worried about the money she'd given Bailey. She confided in her lawyer that she believed she was being swindled. She planned to confront Bailey and demand her money back. She even hired a private investigator to look into his dealings. This was a critical turning point. Helen was about to blow the lid off a massive criminal enterprise, and the people involved had everything to lose. On February 17, 1977, Helen Brach checked out of the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, after a routine medical checkup. Her chauffeur was supposed to pick her up from the airport back in Illinois, but she never arrived. Days turned into weeks, and there was no word. Her houseman, Jack Matlick, who lived in her mansion, told everyone she was traveling, but his story kept changing. First, she was in Florida. Then, she was in California. He even continued cashing her checks, totaling thousands of dollars. The alarm bells started ringing, but it would be weeks before anyone officially reported Helen Brach missing. By the time police finally began their investigation, the trail was already cold. The investigation into Helen's disappearance quickly became a labyrinth. The first key suspect was her houseman, Jack Matlick. He was the last person known to have had contact with her, and his inconsistent stories and suspicious financial activities put him directly in the spotlight. He claimed he drove her to the airport for a flight to Florida, a trip she never took. He failed a polygraph test, but without a body or a crime scene, police had little to go on. For years, Matlick remained the primary person of interest, but the case stalled. Meanwhile, federal investigators were looking into something seemingly unrelated: the world of high-stakes horse racing. They were uncovering a massive network of fraud, where champion horses are being killed for insurance money. And at the center of this dark web was none other than the charming horseman, Richard Bailey. Bailey and his associates, a notorious crew known as the Horse Mafia, were running scams that involved everything from electrocuting horses to arranging fixed races. As investigators dug deeper, they made a shocking connection. Many of the people involved in the horse insurance fraud scheme were the same people who had been conning Helen Brach. The case took a dramatic turn when a man named Joe Plemons, an associate of Bailey's, came forward with a horrifying story. He claimed that Richard Bailey had confessed to him that he had arranged for Helen Brach to be murdered. Why? Because she had discovered his cons and was threatening to go to the authorities. Exposing Bailey wouldn't just have meant prison time for him. It would have unraveled the entire multi-million-dollar horse mafia operation, implicating dozens of powerful people, including members of the Chicago outfit. According to this new testimony, the plan was simple and brutal. Bailey allegedly solicited two brothers, who were known criminals, to kill Helen after she returned from the Mayo Clinic. The theory is that they confronted her at her home, and when she refused to be silenced, they shot her. Her body was then supposedly disposed of, likely in a steel mill furnace in Indiana, ensuring no trace would ever be found. It was a cold, calculated hit, designed to make a very big problem disappear permanently. The most chilling part of this theory is how close Helen came to escaping. She knew something was wrong. She was taking steps to protect herself. But the criminals she was up against were ruthless. They couldn't afford to have a $60 million witness talking to the feds. Her disappearance wasn't a random act of violence. It was a business decision. With this new information, prosecutors finally had what they needed to move on Richard Bailey. But here's the unbelievable twist. Without a body, they couldn't charge him with murder in state court. The no body, no murder rule was a huge obstacle. So federal prosecutors got creative. They couldn't prove he killed her, but they could prove he solicited her murder as part of a wider conspiracy to commit fraud. In 1994, 17 years after Helen vanished, Richard Bailey was arrested and charged not with murder, but with conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and mail fraud in connection with his scams against Helen Brach and other wealthy women. The trial was a media circus. It brought the sordid details of the horse mafia to light. Witnesses described a world of greed, deception, and cold-blooded violence. Bailey maintained his innocence, claiming he was just a simple horse trader. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Jurors heard how he preyed on lonely, wealthy widows, charming them out of their fortunes. They heard the testimony about his alleged confession. After a lengthy trial, the jury found Richard Bailey guilty. The judge declared that the evidence proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Bailey had orchestrated Helen Brach's murder, even though it wasn't the primary charge. He was sentenced to life in prison. So, is the case closed? Not entirely. Richard Bailey was convicted of conspiracy, but no one has ever been convicted of the actual act of murdering Helen Brach. The two brothers who were allegedly hired as hitmen were never charged due to lack of evidence. Jack Matlick, the mysterious houseman, maintained his innocence until his death, leaving many unanswered questions about his role. And most importantly, Helen Brach's body has never been found. In 1984, 7 years after she was last seen, she was declared legally dead. Her vast fortune went to her beloved animal charities, fulfilling her final wish. The mystery of the missing Candy Heiress remains a haunting tale of wealth, greed, and betrayal. It serves as a chilling reminder that behind the glittering facade of high society, a much darker world can exist. Helen Brach was a smart, vibrant woman who was tragically ensnared by predators who saw her not as a person, but as a piggy bank to be broken. What do you think really happened? Do you believe the prosecution's theory, or could there be another explanation still buried in the past? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is one of those cases that will likely be debated for generations to come. A true American mystery that began with a sweet candy fortune and ended in a bitter, unsolved tragedy. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most compelling mysteries. See you next time.